everyone, welcome to Zon in Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. So this is a podcast that focuses on the connections between anime and Canadian media. Joining me on this episode is someone who has worked in that area in the past in terms of adapting anime for the North American market through Ocean Studios, or just like the old school Canadian dubbing institutions. It's Michelle Clough. Michelle, could you give a quick introduction to yourself?
Hi there. My name is Michelle Clough. I used to be a localization editor / writer / sort of that type of thing for Ocean Studios, as Jesse said. I got to work on several titles, some of which you may have heard of, like Death Note, Saiunkoku, Otome. I did I think I did either the dub or the subtitle for the Gundam 00 movie, and a couple of other titles that are escaping me at the moment.
You did Pretty Cure, and
yes,
you did a Tokusatsu Spider-Man, perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. There's a story there. I was gonna say that like I sort of started off in doing anime dubs, like doing the scripts for dubbed anime, and then sort of midway through I started transitioning into doing more subtitling. And so I did the Tokusatsu Spider-Man for what was it? Like it was like a lot of episodes of that. It was something like 100 episodes or whatever.
I think they translated the whole thing. I admittedly didn't double check that. But
it was a lot of episodes. Yeah, they did the whole thing, and I think I subtitled a couple of other shows as well. I think I did one of the Otome OAVs, and then from there that actually transitioned me when I sort of ended up moving on a little bit. I ended up getting into closed captioning, which I did for several years with a company called Line 21, which is very much sort of subtitling, but more for hearing impaired, and on for TV. But all during that, I was also like, man, I really want to do video games, guys. I really like writing video games. So I started doing that sort of freelance on the side. And now it is my full-time job, or I guess full-time freelancing. I actually am now a partner with a company called Tail Spinners, which is a outsourcing studio for game writing, narrative design, and story services for video games. So basically, companies could come to us, be like, "Hi, we need writing for our video game," and then they hire us, and we do that. So I'm still very strongly in the geek sphere. Just have unfortunately had to refocus my attentions a little bit away from anime and onto video games, because there's only so many geeky hours in the day. But I still have a love for anime, and so I was really happy to get to come on and talk about it.
Yeah, you just cashed all of your geek points into the gaming section rather than the anime section.
Yeah, exactly. I decided to respec, and it's just like I tried to min max, and then I'm like, no.
Yeah, it's the only way to manage it sometimes. So we're gonna do a little bit of an interview just about your work in the past. Before we jump into that, there's a couple of news items I just wanted to cover quickly. So Michelle, I think you know this already, but we're recording this on August 29th, and well, I mean, this news story was, of course, overshadowed by the horrible tragedy of Chadwick Boseman passing away last night, or the announcement he had passed away last night, which was utterly shocking and just completely arrested all of social media. And it brought this bummer of 2020 to an entirely different level for sure. And I kind of just don't even know what to say about that one. Before that happened, though, the thing I was focusing on, or I was more focused on, was the fact that yesterday was the 25th anniversary of Sailor Moon's North American debut, which was on YTV on Monday, August 28th, 1995. Now, I would argue that Sailor Moon was probably, to this day, has probably still had more of a cultural impact in Canada than any other anime, except maybe Pokemon. Pokemon is like its own thing.
the only ones I can think of that would come close would be, as you say, Pokemon and maybe Dragon Ball Z. But to a certain extent, I'm sort of like, please don't fight. You can all be the best anime.
I always say that if you just exclude Pokemon, which again is just a weird worldwide phenomenon, which is kind of its own thing, I'd say the top three are generally Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, or Dragon Ball Z, and Inuyasha. But Sailor Moon was definitely, or the start of the epoch in Canada.
Yes.
Famously, it took off a few years here before it did in the United States, mainly because it had a good, consistent time slot on YTV, whereas it kind of floundered until it found its way on Toonami in about 1999 in the US, and it, exploded into various things like those weird stage shows they had in Ontario, which I only learned about much later because, of course, we don't live in Ontario. Yeah, it was a weird, big cultural phenomenon. And I'm curious. I know you're a few years older than me. Were you watching Sailor Moon at that time? Did you discover it on TV or?
Absolutely. Yeah. I was like this giant Sailor Moon fan. And even though I was probably a little bit older than its target audience, I was like, I don't think I started watching exactly from episode 1, because at first I just, I saw it on those paper TV guides we got at the time, and I was like, Sailor Moon, what on earth is that? And funnily enough, I remember the moment that I went from I don't care to, I need to see this immediately, was like they had some commercial for like the dolls on TV, and then it showed like clips from the show, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's anime on TV. Because I was actually already into anime at the time. I had actually
that's what I was wondering. Were you already an anime fan, or kind of in the fandom, or discovering it?
Yes, and I don't remember exactly what initially got me into anime. To be honest, I think it might have been that I was interested in JRPGs at the time. The video game and the anime thing, it's all connected.
They tried so hard to suppress the anime-ness in JRPGs, but they failed. They failed. It still broke through.
So I do definitely remember the very first anime that I was into, that I was aware was an anime, was Ranma 1/2. And I think actually that might have even come about because like there was like a Ranma 1/2 video game that came out around that time for the Super Nintendo, and it wasn't very good at all, but it had such a cool art style to it that I'm like, man, this is really cool. I want to learn more about this show. And then I started becoming more and more aware of like anime as like, a concept and as a medium. And I think the very first like anime movie or Ranma movie I watched was it was actually the movie Big Trouble in Nakan China. And I was just like, I need to immediately watch more of this stuff. So I'd actually already been into anime for I think several years by that point. I was into Ranma. I'd watched Tenchi. I don't remember exactly like what other stuff, because like I could give you a big list of all the anime like that I ended up watching when I was a teenager, because God, there was a hell of a lot. But I admit that in my 40-year-old brain at this point doesn't remember like, wait, did I watch Akira before Sailor Moon or after Sailor Moon? Man, I don't remember. But so, point being though, that was one of those things where up until that point, anime was the sort of thing that I had to make a special trip to, what was it, Sunrise Videos, or HFV Videos. Like there were specific video stores in Vancouver, and only in Vancouver, that you could go into and get like the VHS copies of like the dub of Ranma. And it was part of what was actually making me like make all these like pilgrimages to like Vancouver, like, cause I was living in Kamloops at the time, and I was always coming to Vancouver like, I gotta go buy more anime.
It would have been like at that time HMV Music World. I don't think there weren't any Sunrise records in Canada. I think it was a little before the Virgin Megastore downtown.
I think I had to like I went to Sunrise or something, like I went on a trip down to Washington State or something and was like, oh my God, they have actual anime here. So I was so used to this idea of anime being this niche thing that was like, you had to go into a specific store and find like tapes on the shelves. And there I am watching YTV, and the Sailor Moon doll commercial comes up, and I'm like, wait a second, that's anime. I need to watch this show immediately. And the first episode I watched was, I think, the episode like 1 or 2 after Sailor Mars joins the team. So it was sort of like, it was that initial arc where it's just Sailor Moon, Mercury, and Mars. And I was like, I'm hooked. And yeah, as I said, approaching 40, and I'm pretty much still hooked.
I didn't catch it right from the beginning either. I heard friends were telling me about it, and they had very strange descriptions of what they had seen. They did indicate that it was Japanese or anime, and at that point I knew what it was. I was 9, but I had seen the Anti-Gravity Room, so it had I was prepared to know where it was from and what it was. So and yeah, I think I jumped in. I think the first episode I saw was the one where Jadeite had his own radio show. I'm pretty sure that was the first episode I saw.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I definitely loved it from the start. I kind of fell out of it after the initial 65 episode run. But yeah, honestly, Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
Definitely a strong legacy with that one. And it is very appropriate that earlier this week it was also confirmed that at long last the Viz uncut Sailor Moon dub is finally going to be streaming in Canada. About, like 4 or 5 years too late. I think they started adding that thing to Hulu in like 2016. But of course that's made it a US exclusive. Yeah, it is. It's coming to Crave, and it is going to be the English dub. They have all 5 seasons, and I have been in contact with Crave, and I have a few details about it. Awesome. So it will be the dub. As far as I know, they do not have the subtitled version. You can see that on Tubi, of course. But it's in an unusual situation where the rights between the subtitled version are split. And the sub version is on Tubi, the dubbed version will be on Crave. This will mark the first time that the dub will be available streaming in Canada. Before you either had to buy it digital download to own or buy the DVDs and Blu-rays of it. So this is the first time you can see it streaming. So this is something that I just found out. This is the first time that a stream has been announced for the Sailor Stars dub. That one is not on Hulu in the U.S. yet. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if it pops up on Hulu either before or on September 18th, which is the launch date for Sailor Moon on Crave. But still, we're not, at least that's one season we're at least not seriously lagging on in terms of getting through Crave. Sailor Moon, it will be on the basic tier of Crave, the lowest tier.
I've got Crave, but only just because I was trying foolishly to watch the last season of Game of Thrones.
And you still got that? You still got the subscription going from that?
Yeah, because I'm lazy and I forgot to turn it off.
That's what they're counting on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that and the fact I keep needing to catch up on all the Star Trek stuff, like Star Discovery and stuff.
It's the destination for that right now. Even though we have CBS All Access in Canada, it's all the Star Trek stuff is on Crave. Yeah, so it's $9.99 for the basic tier of Crave, and that's all you need to watch Sailor Moon.
I have to admit, I didn't even realize that that Stars had a dub. Like, I confess I was one of those obnoxious fans who, like, once we got through, as you say, that first 56 episode arc, I went fan subs and didn't look back. And so even when they did start, like, releasing the rest of it in dub, I remember, like, turning it on being like, oh my god, they changed all the actors. Now it sucks. And this isn't who I would cast for Hotaru and blah, blah, blah. So, I was one of those fans. It was horrible.
Well, they didn't dub Sailor Stars back then, but this is all the new LA dub that's been produced by Viz Media. So that old Deke and Cloverway dub, it's gone. Basically, at least my understanding is that either Toei or Naoko Takeuchi, probably Naoko Takeuchi, does not want that version released. So I think as long as she's alive, we're probably not going to see an official release of that Deke or Cloverway dub, which a lot of people seem to be disappointed about. I guess I understand the nostalgia, but I don't know. I think it's more valuable to have like the uncut version available.
Yeah, fair enough. I will say I did really like some of the voice actors that they got a good cast for the dub for Sailor Moon. And it hit like. I don't know, like, I initially liked it, then I got very kind of, dub purist and being like, no, they changed it, and then I actually started working in dubs, and then I'm like, oh, that's why they changed it. And now I'm kind of come full circle to be like, yeah, actually, as far as dubs go, like, yeah, it has its, like, crappy moments, but so does every dub, and it has some moments that, like, really, really, shined, and I liked, oh, I've forgotten, like, there were like 3 actresses they got for Serena, and I really like kind of the middle one.
Terry Hawks.
Yeah,
she's almost basically everyone's favorite for Sailor Moon. She was very good. Yeah, but the key argument that people always make between those 2 dubs is that in the original Deke dub, even though it's, heavily altered, you got, changed music in the Deke episodes, they cut about 10 episodes purely just for pacing. And including Sailor Venus's origin episode, which that's a decision I do not understand to this day. That was I can't believe they did that. And obviously changing genders and relationships and things like that, which is the thing people always hyperfixate on. But the key argument in favor of that dub has always been that the voices for the characters are incredibly distinct. You can close your eyes and you can identify which character is speaking. In the new dub, now it's not that the characters don't sound distinct, but they're kind of voice actors you hear in all sorts of other dubs and other LA voice acting productions. There's a sameness to them. It's not that they all sound the same, but it's just like you've heard these voices elsewhere. And they're not really bringing a unique performance in Sailor Moon. So the end result is, I think, technically a better dub, but again, it's less distinct, a little less memorable. Nonetheless, I think it's just important that the dub is out there. I think it's great that it's actually on Crave and not Tubi, because Tubi is free and technically more accessible than Crave. But the problem is no one knows what Tubi is.
This is literally the first I've heard of Tubi.
Exactly. I've told people all the time that, even people who are complaining that they can't watch Sailor Moon in Canada, it's on Tubi, and they've never heard of Tubi before. I think I did know about Tubi before Sailor Moon was announced for the service, but I didn't care about Tubi before Sailor Moon was announced for the service. I think only people who were fixating on that news even knew that the subtitled version was added there. Which is, it's unfortunate because Tubi's, I don't want to praise it too much because it's actually owned by Fox now. But for an ad-based service, it's pretty well done. They even splice the commercials right between the eye catch perfectly, almost every time. Which is, I know. Like, we shouldn't be impressed by that, yet I am.
It's like, congratulations, like, here was the minimum bar, and you cleared it, good job.
And it's so weird because, like, I mean, you look at Hulu, which is entirely ad-based, but they could never find a way to make their business model work outside of the United States. And yet Tubi is, mainly in North America, but in other countries around the world, and they have made that ad-based model work even before they were owned by Fox, which I find puzzling, and it really shows how shitty Tubi or shitty Hulu actually is, just in terms of how they run that business. But yeah, the key thing is that people are far more familiar with Crave. Definitely, I think older, more casual audiences are definitely more likely to have Crave. Again, probably because they were watching Game of Thrones or something like that and never bothered to get rid of the subscription. And there's enough stuff popping up in it that keeps their subscription going. But it's good that the dub's on there because it means it's going to be it's more appealing to casual audiences who, may have watched Sailor Moon back in the day and just never bothered to seek it out since it ended. And now they're like, oh, the show's here, and there's that 5th season that they never showed on YTV. May as well jump into that. And it's, it makes it more accessible for some people with disabilities. And I think maybe most importantly, it makes it a lot easier for parents to show with their kids too.
I was just going to say that because I actually, I have a friend of mine, who you might actually remember from Anime Club Logan, who he and his wife have kids, and they're they've gone through their sort of they're going through Paw Patrol phases and Nihao Kailen phases, but and then one day I come over to game and they're like, so we showed like our daughter a little bit of like, Sailor Moon, and she seemed to really like it. Would you like, if she shows like more interest, would you mind like being her guide in the world of Sailor Moon? And I was like, crack knuckles. All right, I got this. So yeah, like as you say, like at the moment, I don't think that, because I think one of the questions was like, how do we watch Sailor Moon? And I'm like, good question.
Yeah.
You either have somebody who has the DVDs, which I've got, like, I have like S, but I don't have like, I think at that point I didn't have like original and R, or you be in America, or you have a VPN. So yeah, the fact of that they can, that they can have that access is great. The only thing is, of course, I don't think they have Crave. So, I mean, that's going to be an interesting thing that like everybody now, is kind of, there's the streaming wars in terms of like, okay, I've got Netflix and I've got Disney Plus. Do I really need to get Crave now? Or I've got Crave and Netflix. Do I bother with Disney Plus? So it'll be interesting to see, is Sailor Moon enough of a draw that people like my friends will be like, yep, sure, we'll sign up for Crave as well as like all the other streaming stuff.
I guess there's the question of whether people who want to see Sailor Moon will subscribe to Crave for it, or people who already have Crave will be interested in watching Sailor Moon. I think that's kind of the key thing, and I think the more important element might actually be the people who already have Crave just stumbling on it there.
Actually, I have a silly question, and this just shows like how kind of out of the loop I've been as far as like anime goes. Because I don't have a Crunchyroll account. I keep meaning to get one. I thought that Crunchyroll had Sailor Moon on their service, or am I misremembering?
No, they definitely don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think they had mentioned on social media before that they wanted to try and get the Canadian rights for it, but Viz wouldn't play ball, or that's what they insinuated.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that explains why. Because I was just like, I could have sworn I remember seeing a tweet somewhere back in the mists of time about like Sailor Moon on Crunchyroll, because that's obviously like one place where like, hey, do you like anime? Here it is all in one place. But it'll be interesting to see, as you say, like how many people will be current Crave users that stumble into it versus how many people will be like, oh my god, at last I can have my Sailor Moon fix, and sign up for Crave, versus, as you say, how many people will just be like, wait, did you say Tubi? Tubi is free? Why don't I go get that and watch, was it the subtitled version?
Yeah, subtitled version is on Tubi right now. You can go watch the whole thing.
Nice.
Tubi's on like every platform too, so
yes,
it's quite accessible.
I will have to get an account for that because you
don't even need an account. You can just
oh,
watch.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. They do have the whole thing there. Actually, Crunchyroll does have the Sailor Moon ARM movie. That's one thing that they do have on there, but not any of the series or anything else.
Yeah. Man, I'm a dinosaur. I just remember being like, remember those days when we used to be able to buy box sets of entire seasons of anime? Like, what happened to that? Oh, they got like super expensive and yeah.
I mean, there's still lots of that, but there's also lots of shows that aren't getting releases at all anymore. Even like some stuff like Crunchyroll licenses just doesn't get released on disc. And it all depends like who's sort of in the consortium of companies that purchases it, or if another company is able to get the home video rights, or one company's sitting on the home video rights. It can be pretty frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll need to actually because I remember there was at one point a box set of like the entire Sailor Moon series, but like I didn't buy it at the time because it was ridiculously expensive, and now I'm sort of like, is that even still in print? Take some research after this.
I think that's the old ADV set. That's definitely long gone. The new sets are much better, even though there were some weird video quality problems. I think with the first two seasons that Viz put out. I haven't bought any of them personally. I'm kind of waiting till they do like full season re-releases rather than the 10 volume release they have right now. Hoping that maybe they'll do something a little better quality next time. But you know what is expensive? Kind of going back to what we were saying before. I think most of the Deke dub, the original Deke dub, did get released on DVD. Those are expensive. You can get like the first couple of volumes at a reasonable price, but after that it shoots up astronomically. Yeah. Yeah. I guess there is demand for that old classic dub for sure. And of course there's going to be a fair share of people who are going to find Sailor Moon on Crave and think, oh, this isn't the dub I remember as a child.
It's ruined forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some jarring things, like when you hear Luna's voice for the first time, you definitely know you're watching a different version, because they take a different approach with that character, which I think is a more accurate approach, but obviously not what you remember.
Yes. Yeah. I do remember having that moment of sort of like, being used to basically the sort of the Angela Lansbury-ish voice, and then actually seeing the Sailor Moon S movie and being like, that is not the human form I would have attached to that voice.
Yeah, that's one of the strongest arguments for not going with that voice, actually, even though the movie's not canon or anything. But yeah, another important thing is that Sailor Moon is kind of the first serious anime acquisition that Crave has made as well. Up until now, they had like a couple movies that, they have Ghost in the Shell, which was probably just picked up as a part of an existing licensing package. And they have the Dragon Ball Z Broly movie for some reason. But this is like the first time they have picked up a full series directly from an anime distributor. And that's really good, because when you have a long series like that, that is something that's really going to be able to communicate to them how much viewership anime can draw in, which is something I don't think they really have seen through that service before. And as for, obviously a big hope is that because so much Viz stuff is still Hulu exclusive, which means that you can't watch it in Canada at all. Like most of Inuyasha, including Inuyasha the Final Act, is all still Hulu exclusive, never streamed in Canada except for the first 2 seasons. Ranma 1/2, another title that's completely Hulu exclusive. There's a couple other titles they have that just aren't available here for whatever reason. And I don't know if Sailor Moon's success is or if Sailor Moon is successful, if it's gonna lead to them looking into more of that stuff. I definitely really hope that it does. So, obviously I think the real success of Sailor Moon is gonna depend on people finding it there. But, spread the word for sure.
Yeah.
Let people know that it's coming to the service. I think a lot of positive buzz about that right near the beginning could help a lot, especially since Crave, the thing about Crave, it doesn't have algorithms like, say, Netflix does. So the most visibility it's going to have is when it's listed as a new release for like the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, it's all going to depend on how Crave decides to classify it into their weird categories. One other important thing is that Sailor Moon was actually licensed through WoW Unlimited. WoW Unlimited was the company that resulted after the merger of Rainmaker and Frederator Studios. The initiative for WoW Unlimited as like a Canadian company is headlined by not only Michael Hirsch, who was like the former head of Nelvana and Teletoon, but also Fred Sabert, who has had a very long history with Viacom and Cartoon Network and different companies in the United States. Originally, their plan was to launch WoW as like a kids channel, like a TV channel in Canada, and apparently they're still trying to do that. I don't know if that's ever going to happen at this point. I'm not even going to speculate on that. But they have a partnership with Bell Media for obtaining like, youth content for Crave, and they're the ones who licensed it. I believe it's going to be uploaded onto the service under their WoW World brand. Don't quote me on that. I don't know what's actually going to happen in the end. But that is how that acquisition came to be. So what that company does might also factor into any future acquisitions that happen. But again, we got to wait and see. Hopefully Sailor Moon does well. Hopefully it has some traction. I mean, it's Sailor Moon.
Yes.
if after the legacy that Sailor Moon has built here over 25 years, it can't bring in a substantial audience on a streaming service, I think that it will be very disappointing.
Yeah. Well, I still think though that like that Sailor Moon fan base is still there, and it's still so strong. And actually, funnily enough, the like my recent experience with it is, as you may know, the makeup brand ColourPop did like a Sailor Moon collaboration of like Sailor Moon branded makeup. And I've been trying to get like the $80 like, pack of everything. Yeah. You cannot. Like, it's just basically they sort of say like about once a month, they're just kind of like, yeah, guys, we've got like, another like shipment, that you could buy it and blah, blah, blah. And like, it's going to go live at 10 a.m. and I'm like there at like 10:05. It's already sold out. So I'm just like, that to me says something very strong about the Sailor Moon brand and Sailor Moon fans. Like, because, like, to be fair, I actually don't even know, like, the age of the people who are buying that Sailor Moon makeup. Like, are they new fans? Are they old fans? I suspect it's a bit of both.
I think it's mostly older fans that a lot of the merchandise is geared towards now. Actually, in the previous episode when we were doing the retrospective on Pretty Cure, we were talking about how when they were developing Pretty Cure from the ground up, which is obviously very similar to Sailor Moon, one thing that they that influenced the direction they took with the project was that Sailor Moon is considered something that you can't really make anymore, at least not as a kid's property in Japan, which is why, Sailor Moon Crystal, the recent remake, and I should note that, just in case it wasn't clear, Sailor Moon Crystal is not part of the Crave package. It's just the 5 seasons of the original series. Sailor Moon Crystal is targeted at adults. It is targeted at older fans, and all the merchandise that is tied into it is like expensive jewelry and things like that. Definitely for people who are in their 20s, 30s, or 40s even. So that's kind of the basis of the whole franchise right now. There was an interesting video I saw that was making the rounds on YouTube about, maybe could put it into context. I think I found it to be pretty interesting about how it was by like that Japanese guy Yuta, who's a YouTuber, and he talked about how the language that the characters, the type of Japanese that the characters speak in Sailor Moon is a very outdated, stereotypically feminine way of talking that you don't hear anymore. Or at least if you hear it, it's not as predominant as it was in media back at that time. So I think at least in Japan, the kind of cultural attitude of something like Sailor Moon has kind of shifted in a weird way. But that has definitely influenced the way that it's marketed. And I guess it's kind of interesting to see how that spread outside of Japan too, especially with those kinds of situations like you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because like now I think like whenever I see Sailor Moon merchandise, it's always like pretty expensive, and it's never like, you don't see much in the way of like toys or anything like that. Like when Sailor Moon first came out on YTV, it was all like, like
the Moon Cycle.
Yeah, the Moon Cycle, exactly. And there were like action figures, and there were like, cheap plastic, brooches and things like that. And well, now we still have those brooches and the moon wand and all that stuff, but now they're ridiculously expensive. And as you say, like we've got more jewelry, we've got makeup. I think there definitely is that sort of perception that, the people who were really in love with the original series are now adults. They now have, well, I was going to say they now have money, but let's face it, we're all broke. But but there's that idea of like, we're not just like the kids with the pocket money anymore. We're the adults that are giving the pocket money, and in some cases probably they're turning around and getting an entirely new generation into either the old school anime or Sailor Moon Crystal. And I was actually thinking when we were talking about like the acquisition process and like will Crave pick up more anime series, and I'm like, I'd be really interested to see how it goes, because you sort of think about it as like, well, by this time, by this age, the people who are making those decisions might actually be old school anime fans. Like they were the ones who were watching Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball Z. So like, is that going to influence them as well? That sort of feeling of, okay, I know that I'm supposed to be like, marketing person by the numbers, but god damn it, I really love like Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon, and I want them back all on Crave now.
So much of the proliferation of anime in mainstream media is waiting for someone who was a fan to just be in the right position to be able to push something in the right way, which unfortunately just doesn't seem to happen very often in Canada, which I think has been a big part of what's been holding anime back for like broadcast and being on major Canadian streaming platforms like Crave. And I think it's important to have that anime in general is on a Canadian platform like Crave as well, because then it just kind of diversifies the way media is approached in this country, which I think is important. I think that's very important. But yeah, enough about that. Let's get the interview portion of this going.
Sure.
So Michelle, most of the work you did was doing script adaptation. So can you kind of describe what this role entails?
Yeah, so script adaptation. So like a lot of people, when I told them like I was working, on dub, they sort of assumed like I was doing the translation. And I wasn't. My Japanese is like intermediate at best. But the problem is that a lot of the times when you translate something literally from Japanese to English, or really like any language to any language, you're always going to get like kind of weird sort of phrasing. Like, so for example, the one I always liked was, I don't remember which script it was in, but it was like the term in Japanese shikari shite means, if you literally translate it, it's like, please endure this, please endure this hardship you're going through. And the thing is, like, nobody would say that in English. Like, we just wouldn't. We would say something like, hang in there. So that was one part of my job, that it was basically like somebody else would translate it, and it would have all these kind of weird, awkward bits here and there that I would have to then like smooth out and basically rewrite it to make it sound like, this script was always in English. This is like just, that it would sound natural. The other part, of course, of it was that I had to match the lip movements. And that was actually like a huge chunk of it, where it'd be like, okay, you'd have like, and the one key thing, if I remember, because sorry, it's been a few years since I've done this, was that like you had to sort of have it so that when, that they would start talking when their lips opened and stop talking when their lips like stopped moving. You could be a little bit more like flexible in the middle. But generally you wanted it to, you wanted to obviously avoid the live action kind of, Godzilla dub effect, in animation. So I not only had to rewrite the scripts for, the sort of the natural English speech, but also to match what the lip movement was doing. And yeah, sometimes that was difficult, because it would be like, their lip would go flap, 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 flap. And then like the translation would be yes. And so I'm like, okay. Mm-hmm. So then you have to take that and you have to be something like, you're right. And then I have to like add in some extra, fluff almost to sort of match lip movement.
So you have the video and you're like going back and like watching scenes over and over again and trying to mouth dialogue over what you're seeing, or would you have to do things like that to try and nail down that timing? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I'd have like, I remember I didn't exactly have like a super professional program for it either. Like now I'm sort of like, my God, why didn't I have something where I could scrub the audio? But I had like, the video up in one, like, they would give me like at the time burnt CDs that were sort of like the video of the show I was doing. And I would sort of pop them on my computer and I'd have them, the video open in one window and the Word document open in another. And I'd write out, whatever I wanted to try, then I'd sort of like rewind a little bit and go and try and deliver the line, say, no, that's way too long, go back, rewrite it, try it again, no, now it's way too short, do it again. So yeah, it was very interesting, because one of the recommendations they always make to writers, particularly screenplay writers and video game writers, is, read your dialogue aloud so that you can see whether it sounds natural or not. I will admit that doesn't always work, because when I was doing that job specifically, there was like, I was so focused on getting like the lip movement thing that I will freely admit occasionally I would go back and be like, why did I write that line? It's so awkward. But I was so focused on getting that lip movement, that I somewhat goofed. So yeah, I had to basically spend a lot of time, writing a line, reading it out, trying to act it out, of course, because obviously, like, the actor would be, reading it out. It sometimes helped if I, like, knew who the actor was going to be for a part, because then I could kind of, like, oh, this is so-and-so, I kind of know what their voice, Kirby Morrow, I kind of know what his voice sounds like, I'll imagine it in my head, that'll, like, if he does it at this speed, it'll be fine. It was a very acting heavy job, because there was a lot of reading out and having to repeat lines over and over and over again to just double check that like they worked.
And did you have any trouble when it came to handling things like puns or cultural, really specific cultural references that came up in scripts?
Oh,
like how did you find yourself dealing with things like that?
So, so for example, puns almost universally are really difficult to deal with because they're so specific to the language that they are originally written in. And you sort of almost have to, part of localization is, the kind of, it's not always a case of, I want to get this as close to the original script as possible. Sometimes it's more, I want to get this close to the original sentiment as possible, the original meaning and the original, intent of it. So usually, if it was something like a pun, I would basically look at it and I'd say, okay, what is the pun riffing off of? Is it just a pun, in which case any pun will do, or is it a pun that relates to the plot line, in which case I need to work backwards from there, and sort of go from there. I'm trying to actually think of a specific example, and unfortunately, of course, I'm blanking. To use a non-anime example, it would be like if if somebody was localizing, Game of Thrones and realizing, okay, Hodor has this name that is not a pun, but it's related to this specific phrase he says later on, but that phrase is, in English, but that phrase isn't going to be in English, it's going to be in, Spanish or French or whatever. I need to come up with what the equivalent phrase in, French would be, and then I've got to work out what his name is in French based on that. I don't think that's what they did, but that's what they're technically supposed to do. So I was doing a lot of that, basically trying to work out, okay, what was the point of this pun? What was the joke they were trying to get across? And can I kind of reverse engineer it for English, for doing an equivalent pun with maybe a different structure. And yeah, sometimes it can end up a bit tortured. Other times it works perfectly fine. Things like visual cultural elements were tough, and I'll freely admit that I occasionally was dinged a little bit for certain projects where I was so trying to honor and keep accurate to the original Japanese that they were kind of no, this is going to be on, broadcast TV. You should loosen it up and make it more accessible to a mainstream audience. So for example, I remember I think at one point they had onigiri on screen, the rice balls. And I think my initial first draft, I think I called them rice balls, and they were yeah, no, you could make an argument that we want it to be accessible. We want mainstream kids to be, recognizing themselves in this. You could make it something like donuts or something like that. So, and I did do a little bit of that for a couple shows for Pretty Cure, actually.
Yeah, we in the Pretty Cure episode, we were amused by some of the food adaptation choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of the. That also. I was curious, how much freedom did you have to make calls on translation? Did you find?
I think it to a certain extent depended. It did depend on the series. So, for example, something like, Death Note. That I feel like the sort of it was pretty strict about what I could and could not change. And to be honest, that was a show where I probably wasn't, that was one where, I wouldn't have wanted to change anything anyway. Pretty Cure, a series like Pretty Cure, which was really the only one I did that, had really broad changes. I think there was more freedom to make my own decisions about what I would use, but there was a kind of a much stricter mandate of we know what we want the final effect of your changes to be, nail that, and whatever you have to do to get us there, do that thing. Didn't always hit it, but that was just sort of working out the right balance. Whereas something with Death Note, I sort of feel like that was more, well, I mean, to a certain extent, that was very much just kind of hey, we've got this anime in front of us. We're not going to, tweak it very much. Just make sure it's still Death Note. And I'm cool, I can do that.
I know with Death Note, you did it was the second half that you did mainly.
Yes.
Correct. Because I don't know if you even remember this, but obviously Death Note was very, was the source of many memes at that time. And the whole, Light getting his Death Note back and saying just as planned was one. And the fan translations always used just as planned when he summarized his scheme after getting his memories back. Whereas in both the Viz manga and in the anime, it was translated as exactly as planned, which is, I think, actually more accurate to what he said in Japanese. But again, it's not what the meme was. I mean, you're the person who made that call, I guess. But
I thought the meme was all according to Keikaku.
Oh, that's the extra level of the meme that came after. That is the better joke for sure.
Keikaku means plan.
Actually, that part of the meme is commenting on, the big deal people make about the distinction between just as planned and exactly as planned. And it's just people being attached to the translation. But I don't know, did any of that kind of stuff influence the final decisions you made on some lines?
Quite honestly, no. So I liked Death Note, but I wasn't like deep into the Death Note fandom at that time. And in fact, to be honest, even if I had been, I probably would have actually to a certain extent tried to unpin myself a bit just to try and remain, I guess, to a certain extent neutral.
That's entirely reasonable, I think.
Yeah, but so the truth is, I was not heavily the other thing was that around that point I had kind of given up the fan subs and stuff because to a certain extent it's like, oh wait, I'm now working professionally in the industry, and this is kind of, now technically in a weird area.
This was like mid to late 2000s, which is just kind of right before the transition into streaming. So it was an awkward time for that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I actually had a pretty an interesting awkward story where I was like, I literally think the words "hoist by my own petard" came out of my mouth about fan subs. But to answer for Death Note, no, I was not aware of specific phrases that the fans adored and wanted. I apologize for any fans that are just like, you, this is your fault.
I can guarantee you nobody cares anymore.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. As I said, I wasn't deeply into the Death Note fandom. It was a show that I liked, but I was more down the video game fandom at that point. Funnily enough, when you were talking about memes, though, the one that still haunts me to this day is the last episode. I very innocently, very honestly took the actual translation and had Light yell the phrase, this is a trap, or it's a trap. And the next thing I knew, it was Admiral Akbar from Pillar to Post, and I'm just like, no, that was like, I legitimately meant that phrase. Like, that is actually what he's saying. It makes sense in context. God damn it, internet, stop. I genuinely did not put in the "it's a trap" with the Admiral Akbar thing in mind. It was only when it went live that I was like, oh no, what have I done?
If it's any consolation, I actually don't remember that at all. So
there was some other line I remember that people were memeing from the last episode. I don't remember what it was, but the "it's a trap" one was definitely like a big one, and I was just like, but it's tough because you think about that, it's like, yeah, but in context of the episode, it makes complete 100% sense why he would say it's a trap, and it's sort of weird that we take some, I totally understand it because I do it all the time, but it's interesting how we'll take a genuinely, innocent phrase and be like, no, this phrase is now meme territory and anybody who says it is going to summon Admiral Akbar. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess I should have thought of that before I did that, but I didn't think of it at the time. I was just like, hey, it's a trap.
And it's weird because now that memes have been or internet memes have been a thing for more than 2 decades, it's hard to tell how that kind of thing is going to age, whether intentional or unintentional, or how things that you did years ago will transform depending on how pop culture nomenclature changes. So
yeah. Yeah, part of me is just sort of like, how much was Admiral Akbar a meme at that point? Like, cause, I didn't spend much time on, actually, hang on, now I'm thinking, like, was Twitter even around back then? I don't remember. So yeah, that's
Actually, this was right before Twitter launched, I think, at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yep, that's, but yeah, you're right, that some of these things are going to, age poorly, some of them are going to age well, and some of them are going to come back in ways you never even expected. Like, I keep on expecting, one day to, like, turn on Twitter and, like, suddenly just this one random dub clip of Death Note will be used as some, like, the new meme hotness that everybody's using to describe 2020 or something. So yeah. It's funny, I was thinking about the just as planned versus exactly as planned, and, like, this goes back into that kind of, trying to make things sound not just, natural, but also to a certain extent to, either to match the lip movement, or in some cases to fill, not exactly dead space, but, like, just as planned is a much kind of, like, in terms of just getting it out and saying it, is a lot shorter and snappier than exactly as planned. And if I recall, I think that was a scene where there wasn't actually lip movement involved, but it was sort of like this moment that sort of got held on. I think it was the bit where, like, it's like holding on Light's face while he's got this, triumphant expression and saying this.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, no, it's going to be this moment you want to draw out a little bit, and so as a result, you're gonna use slightly drawn out, like, language to say it.
The extra syllables help a lot with the pacing of the dialogue. So
yes,
yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, pacing is absolutely. I didn't really go into that before, but, like, pacing was also definitely, like, a big part of what I had to do as part of my job, because, of course, sometimes, like, if the lip movement is flap, 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 then it's like, okay, on the one hand, you sort of want to match that diction, but at the same time, you don't want an actor to have to be like, yes, that's really what happened here, blah, 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 blah. It's like, you have to try and, like, structure it in a way that, like, keeps the right pacing with the story, keeps the right pacing with the lip movement, keeps the right pacing for the actor so that their performance isn't wonky. Yeah, it was fun, but it was tough.
Are there any adaptation choices you made in a script that you're particularly proud of?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I feel like there's this part of me that's sort of thinking there must be some in Death Note, but for some bizarre reason I am completely blanking, partly because I have the memory of a sieve, and I'm like, what did I do again? I will say also, part of the problem with doing this work is that just because I handed in the quote-unquote final draft of the script does not necessarily mean that actually got recorded, because so sometimes if I recall, I think there were a few times when it was like, okay, the client will now get a chance to look at this script and they will make adjustments. And then the other thing is that quite often scripts get adjusted in the recording studio because, maybe I messed up the timing or the actor isn't quite getting the timing right. And so the director would actually, like, on the spot be like, could we, let's change this to blah, blah, blah. So the result is that, like, a year later, I sit down and I watch an anime that I did, and I see that, like, wow, there's this really good line, and I'm like, did I say that? Did I write that? I don't remember writing anything that amazing. Did I write that? No, it must have been added by somebody else.
This work is kind of ephemeral in a way.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, that happens with, quite a lot of, creative media that, particularly screenwriting, localization editing, video game writing, that, like, there will be many people that, like, get their hands on it. Funnily enough, I think one of the things I was kind of proud of, which unfortunately I don't think made it to the final version, was I really liked the rewrite I did of Misa's song in, oh god, I don't remember what the episode number was. There's the song she sings kind of at the midpoint of Death Note. And I slaved over my version of the song for, like, forever, and I was really happy with it. They didn't end up going with it. They wrote their own. And it was good, but, like, in fact, who knows, it probably may have been better, but I still am kind of like, man, I was very proud of the work I did on that, and so now I kind of want to see if I can dig up that file again and see what the heck I wrote. Yeah, I'm afraid I can't like remember specifically off the top of my head an adaptation moment that I was specifically proud about, partly because I guess the feeling is that at least for a lot of the anime I was working on, the point of a good adaptation is to almost feel invisible, like as in, no, it was always this way. You've perfectly captured exactly what the original Japanese or the original series was trying to accomplish. So I guess a lot of the moments that I'd sort of feel proud of would be more like, wow, the Japanese had this really cool line and it was really difficult to get it into like the lip flap, but I managed it. I feel awesome. So yeah, sorry, I can't be more specific. I could definitely think of a couple lines where I'm like, when I saw it later, I was just like, oh no, what did I do?
Do you remember those ones? If you would like to share?
Yeah, actually, there's one. It was a line from L. I don't remember the exact line, but I kind of remember the general like gist of it. Where I again, this was one of those cases where like you cannot keep too closely to the Japanese because let me rephrase. Let me try that again. A lot of people think that an ideal translation or an ideal localization is to render the Japanese as exactly as possible. And if they're just talking about the sentiment, yes. If they're talking about the wording or the exact translation, no. And an example of this was there was a line from L, which I don't remember what the exact Japanese translation was, but but my rendition of it was very close. And it was something like, we need, what was it? We need a clear understanding of the situation quickly. And it sort of looked fine on paper, matched the lip flap, and it gets across what I was trying to get. But when I actually saw it in the actual final version, I was just like, that's not what an actual, like, we wouldn't say that. Like, and I don't even think L would say that. Like, I think I kind of in my head was like, oh, well, L's really kind of wordy anyway. Sure, he would say it. But then when it actually went live, I was like, no, what have I done? I'm terrible at this. Because yeah, now I sort of think like probably I need to obviously sit and brainstorm a bunch of ideas, but, rewriting it to be something like, we don't understand, maybe something like, I don't know, we don't understand this situation. That needs to change quickly. Or I don't know, it's not like I need to go back and check the context, but something that felt a little bit more, natural sounding as opposed to this very kind of stilted, this is exactly what the Japanese said, and this is Michelle wanting to be a good localization person and sticking really close to the Japanese, and this is now Michelle in her 40s being like, oh my god, I was an idiot. Actually, no, I was actually thinking I was an idiot before as I said, when I saw it go live, and I was just like, oh no, I shouldn't have written that. There were a few moments like that. So, to your fans, if there are any moments like that in Death Note that you're sort of like, man, that's a really awkward way of saying that, believe me, I know. It tortures me on a daily basis.
And if you found any translations in Death Note you find particularly infuriating, just send them to zanencanada@gmail.com and I'll read them on the air.
Oh god, my ancient shame. And what they don't tell you is even when you become like a writer and you've been doing this for a long time, it's like, man, there's still stuff I write for video games that I'm just like, I swear to God, at this time it sounded like a brilliant idea. What the hell was I thinking? Because of course, with these things, you're on deadline, you're working on them all the time, and to a certain extent, you get it's not that you get lazy, not at all. It's that you just get so embroiled in doing this over and over and over again that you sort of start losing a bit of objectivity. And like, and this is why you generally need a separate editor to look at your work, because, you know, by the time you've written this awkward line, you've been doing this for hours and hours and hours, and you're just like, it sounds amazing. And so having that other person to be like, no, it doesn't. Please go back and try again. Or even just the ability for yourself to come back like a month later and be like, oh, that didn't quite work out. So yeah, it is what it is. But I was pretty happy, in general with the adaptation of Death Note. And obviously part of it was just the amazing cast. They had such a good cast. But you know, even with the occasional, that phrase was awkward, I was pretty happy with the final version. So, it's trap and all.
How did you first get into this work? Just doing the contract work for Ocean Studios. Was it just luck, or did work you were doing before kind of lead you into it?
It was pretty much luck and being like happening to know the right people.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Well, when I say the right people, I don't mean in the sense of I had a deep connection with Ocean Studios and they got me in. Sorry, everyone, you're gonna have to deal with the shortened story of my life for a bit. So as Jesse knows, like when I was at UBC, I was in the anime club. I was president of the anime club, and so as a result, I kind of like knew several people from like the anime community in Vancouver at that time, including the guy who was the head of, I want to say, Anime Evolution. I've forgotten which of the cons, but it was like it was either Anime Evolution or it was the SFU anime club. Anyway, somebody who was kind of in that ecosystem. So we, knew each other by name and sort of said hey on occasion when we met at events. Graduated, went off to Japan, taught English for 2 years, came back, had the usual thing of, crap, I've got to actually find work now. I ended up going to VCon, which is one of the sci-fi conventions in Vancouver, and I bumped into him at, he had like a booth, for Anime Evolution or whatever. And we got to chatting and I mentioned like, oh yeah, I'm, back from Japan looking for work. And he mentioned, oh, Ocean Studios is actually hiring right now. And I'm like, well, really? Cause I knew Ocean Studios, cause I'd, grown up on Ranma and like a lot of their stuff. So I'm like, whoa, this is like big. Oh, tell me more. So, he emailed me the Craigslist ad, cause I think of that, or whatever the equivalent of the Craigslist ad was. Cause if I recall, they were not advertising as Ocean Studios. They were like, they'd kept their name, like it was just, media company looking for production coordinator. And so I'm like, cool. I'm in there. So I sent them an application, kind of letting them know, like, yeah, I know that you guys are Ocean Studios and I'm like a big fan, which, in hindsight was probably a bad idea because that was probably why they were trying to keep their names on the download anyway. They, and I've been to Japan and which was something that interested them because I think they did say in their like familiarity with Japanese media, and I'm like, boy, howdy, am I familiar. So I went there and I had an interview for a production coordinator meeting, and the interview was going well, but it was kind of clear that like, oh wait, production coordinator, that's the person that keeps things organized. If you've known me for 5 minutes, you will know that organization and I are not bedfellows at all. Like, I am the least organized person on the face of the planet. So I was just like, okay, I really would love to get this job, but I suspect I'm not going to get it. So I remember interview wrapped up, was, very polite, very nice. And I kind of walked out thinking, well, I'm probably not going to get that, but hey, I got an interview at Ocean Studios. That's great. And just as I was walking away, the door opened and someone popped out and was like, hey, are you parked anywhere? Like, do you have anywhere to go? Do you have like another couple of minutes? And I'm like, sure. And they said, well, you might be a better fit for one of our writer positions. Do you want to come in and have an interview about that? I'm like, boy, howdy, do I want to come in and have an interview with that. And I came in and actually had an interview with like the head like director or creative director, and apparently said the right things, because the next thing I knew, they were like, I think they may have made me do a writing test. I don't remember. It's been a while. Yeah, no, that's right. They did make me do a writing test that I had to take home and sort of say, like, this took me X amount of hours and blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, they came back and said, okay, cool. Yeah, we've got work for you. Start working on my Otome. And so, yeah, I worked on that, and I basically was in their ecosystem for several years. I really, and when I say I was in their ecosystem, I don't mean in the sense of like, and then there was a terrible fallout. It was just more, we came to a point where they were like, we're really sorry, we don't have any work for you at the moment. At which point I had to be like, that's great, wonderful, I'm sorry, I need to go find, other work to pay the bills. But, it was good. So yeah, that was how I got in there. So, it was to a certain extent knowing the right person, but not in the sense of someone at the company, but more someone who knew that they were hiring and was able to point me in the right direction. So thank you to Edward if you're listening. Yeah, so that, and as I said, that it also definitely helped that I had, not just a knowledge of, that I had just come back from Japan, that I had a bit of familiarity with Japanese culture. Also that I had at least a little bit of Japanese, not enough to do translation, but enough so that when I saw a translation, I could kind of be like, okay, I think I know what the original was. Or even I think there were one or two cases where there was translation and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure what they meant was, blah, blah, blah. Certainly not enough to the translator was amazing, but there were definitely times when having that little bit of extra knowledge allowed me to contextualize things properly. Oh, they're using Keigo. This must be super duper polite,
When your time ended doing this kind of work, was it, I know you transitioned into doing closed captioning work after, was it, but this was kind of this would have coincided about the time that doing anime work at Ocean Studios was declining. Did that have anything to do with your transition, or was it just kind of a natural job progression for you?
I think a little bit of column A and column B. Like, I do definitely remember a few times having, chats with the boss there and sort of being like, do you have any work for me? And her kind of saying, I'm really sorry, but we don't have any anime right now. We're doing other stuff. And I had to keep saying, hey, I'm flexible. Just because I'm an anime fan doesn't mean I'm not open to doing other things. And to be fair, it might have had nothing to do with that. It might have just been like, yeah, but we've got other people. Cause I wasn't their senior writer or anything. I was kind of, I guess by that point about like maybe mid range on the totem pole. But, we were all freelancers. We weren't employees. So I think there was certainly an element of anime work falling off, and as a result there being less work for me. They were super nice about it. Like, I want to stress they were really good. As I said, I don't know whether I do worry sometimes whether because I was such a big anime fan that they were like, Michelle won't want to do anything else. We know what anime fans are like. They're like anime all the time. And I'm like, no. I'm totally okay with doing other things. But cause I was, they did, I remember, when I had that interview, they did actually say like, yeah, we actually don't usually seek out, fans, just because of course it can be difficult for fans to be objective. And to be fair, that was totally true, because like there were definitely times when I'm like, but this is the wrong translation, I want to do it this way. Basically being that fan. But as I said, they were super good to me, and I'm like, to a certain extent, there's still a part of me that's like, man, I wish I could have continued working for them. But there was like just generally less work, and as a result I kind of had to not actively move on, but basically get booked up with other things. And as you say, so the closed captioning thing did though come about to a certain extent very much from my time with Ocean Studios because what happened was I started off doing dubs, as I mentioned, and then I transitioned more into subtitles, which they seem to have. There was a point where there seemed to be much more subtitling work than dub work, and so as a result, I got experience doing subtitals, and then later on I was like, oh, I need work, and what do I have that's a skill? That's it. But I ended up going, and I wanted to find a way to use that as a skill. And then there was an Editor Association of Canada meeting in Vancouver that I paid way too much to get a ticket for because they actually had a session on subtitling and editing, and that session was run by the one of the heads of Line 21, the closed captioning studio that I ended up working at, and I went and it was very interesting, and then I approached afterwards and was like, yeah, like I'm really interested, I want to find out where to get more work for this because, I do this. And she's like, oh, that's cool. Come and have coffee with me sometime and we'll chat. And the next thing I knew, I was, I ended up getting hired and working for them for I think 5 years or something, 5 or 6. I'm terrible at remembering times, but I think I only quit them to do full-time video game work back in I think 2 years ago. So, they're Line 21. They're really good. Thumbs up.
And most of the work that they did, was it for broadcast or for streaming closed captioning as well? Because we've seen a kind of an explosion in the need of closed captioning with various streaming services, or that whole area has kind of shifted, much like other things have.
It was quite a bit of both. I definitely remember there being a lot of interest in sort of Netflix captions, particularly for Hallmark movies. Yes, which were, I could go on a
Those
big
are filmed near my house.
Yeah, no, I captured a lot of, I captured a lot of Hallmark movies. I have a lot of opinions, and I'll keep them off this thing because we don't want it to be 2 hours. So I think there were, there was definitely a beginning to be an understanding of, we need to do digital, captions as well. But I think the majority of the stuff I did, was for a broadcast. We actually did a lot of work, or continue to do quite a lot of work, for, Knowledge Network, which is one of the sort of educational channels here in BC. So my favorite stuff to caption was stuff, there would be days I'd come in and I'd be like, what am I doing today? And they'd be like, we need you to caption this David Attenborough nature documentary. And I'm like, holy God, this is the best day ever. Because, there'd be no, so it's either wordless stuff of adorable animals, or it's David Attenborough, talking in this very soothing, slow, easy to caption way, the giant panda, secretive, elusive. I'm just this is the best job ever. And it was a really good job. It's just that I like video games a bit more. Sorry, guys. So mostly broadcast.
I know that there are, maybe I think this is less the case these days, but I know that going back 10 or 15 years, there were different approaches of doing closed captioning. Sometimes it seemed like they would be, I know I've had closed captioning turn on some broadcasts in the past. It almost seemed like they were writing the captions as the program was being broadcast. Do you know if this is something that happens with scripted TV? I know they do it with live TV, but what's kind of the how do those things work behind the scenes?
Well, obviously, I'm under NDA, ancient NDA, so I can't talk about all of it. But I can say that you're certainly right that live TV is always scripted as it goes. I'm sure there are companies or closed captioning systems that might do the live stuff, because I've definitely seen some very weird captions come up on stuff. But usually what would happen is that they would sort of give, they would give a script that was formatted in a way that you would put it into a certain program, it would break it down line by line, and then you just kind of go through the whole thing, and you'd have to edit it for grammar and spelling and commas, because sometimes those were not that great. And then you would just sort of watch the whole show and basically just kind of, hit a button to sort of say, okay, display this caption at this time. So yeah, we were given the scripts and everything way before, broadcast, so we didn't have to do anything live.
There's a debate you hear, now, especially with things that have multiple language options, of having subtitles for things that are originally not in English versus having closed captioning for those things when they're dubbed into English. And like with a lot of, say, anime, Netflix will have subtitles for the Japanese version, but they won't have closed captioning on, like, the English dub. And of course, there's a very strong distinction between the function that subtitles play and the function that closed captioning plays. I want to know what your thoughts on that were.
I definitely think subtitles and closed captions are sort of two different things, and particularly as dubs have, frankly, in many ways continued to improve in quality, and it's not even so much improve in quality, because I mean there've always been good quality dubs. I think it's that they're beginning to improve in terms of people's regard for them. Dub used to be a dirty word, whereas now people will straight up say, like, oh, I love the dub of, Agretzko or whatever. And actually, so speaking of Agretzko, I was actually thinking about this, and funnily enough, I saw a tweet about it recently, that's on my mind specifically about this. It was saying about, and I'm sorry for whoever actually did the tweet. I don't remember your name, so I can't attribute it to you. But they were basically saying there's this one line. They showed a screenshot from Agretzko where the subtitle of the original Japanese was something like, and don't you think it's sad that you're spending all your money on a virtual boyfriend? And the tweet was basically saying, Agretzko's dub is so good because they rendered that as, oh damn it, I don't remember what they did render it as, but like they had whatever the dub line was, and it was really good. It was really funny. I kind of almost want to find it. Well, anyway, and that's something that if you don't have the closed captions, that people who are have hearing impaired are going to miss that joke. I've found the picture, so the tweet. So it's the tweet is by Vestinet, and
oh, that guy. Yeah.
Yes. So the original subtitles, so the translation of the Japanese for Agretzko, was, spending your money on a bum like your virtual boyfriend isn't dull. As in, oh, and spending money on a bum like your virtual boyfriend isn't dull? Perfectly good line, but apparently what they translated it as, it punches the lineup from Fenico up to example 2. I don't think being sugar mama to a bunch of zeros and ones qualifies as self-care. And I'm like, that's great. Oh my God. I wish I could come up with something that good. So that's the sort of thing where it's absolutely, you should have subtitles for Agretzko, but I feel like that's a different enough twist on the script that you should probably have closed captions for that as well. Also just the fact of so I will say another thing that actually does really bug me at times. So I've been experiencing almost the reverse problem of all things, the Final Fantasy VII remake. I swapped it to, so I basically was like, I think I like the Japanese cast a bit more.
Oh yeah, there's this whole thing.
Yeah, and I'm like, and I started, and I'm like, immediately I'm like, these text things are not what they're saying in Japanese. I know enough Japanese to know that this is basically what they have written for the dub script. And the thing is, don't get me wrong, it's a very good dub script. And whenever I've swapped over to the dub, it's been like, yeah, this is great. But it's a very different kind of feel. And as a result, it's kind of like, yeah, no, closed captioning, what dub actors say and subtitling what the Japanese said, those are different scripts. And frankly, if you are having one, and if you start mixing and matching them, it's really distracting. So I could imagine, cause I quite often watch stuff with closed captioning on anyway, even, in English, just because, sometimes I'm I'm a bit distracted or, my hearing's not that great. So yeah, having the captions on is great. But if I was listening to the dub of a Gretzko while watching a completely different set of subtitles, that have phrased the jokes entirely differently, that would be so distracting. So yeah, no, I absolutely think that having, closed caption of the dub is definitely something that should be done.
One other question that occurred to me with doing closed captioning is the issue of people speaking foreign languages in something that is in English and how you approach it. I was watching Hannibal with the closed captioning on the other night, and I noticed it was an episode that was set in Italy, and when characters were speaking Italian, they would transcribe exactly what those characters were speaking, the actual Italian, in Italian. Mm-hmm. Whereas when characters were speaking, I think, Romanian, it was just written as foreign language. And I've seen some people who I personally strongly disagree with saying that when you hear a foreign language, in an English language production, that language should be translated. I strongly disagree with that. Especially if you're not supposed to know what they're saying. But I want to know what your thoughts are on that specific kind of, when that kind of thing comes up with closed captioning. What do you think is the best approach?
So yeah, that's, I mean, again, I think it comes back to figuring out what the original intent was of the work and trying to go with that. So if the idea is that, hey, these two people are speaking another language, and you're not supposed to be able to tell what they're saying, then yeah, no, I don't think the closed captions should, translate it. I don't remember doing much in the way of specific translation unless it was, intended, or if it was, I'm trying to remember. I think there may have been a few documentaries or something where okay, this you want to, translate. But usually that should be made reasonably clear at the beginning of a project. The thing that's kind of bugging me, funnily enough, is more what you were saying about they completely translated the Italian, but then they just said speaking foreign language. I have iffiness of just phrasing languages as foreign languages, because again, it kind of centers I understand what the idea is, that it's well, it's not, English, but it kind of gets into this really icky thing of there's English and then there's foreignness.
Yeah.
Whenever I could, I did my best to actually figure out what language they were speaking, and then say, speaking Italian or speaking Romanian or speaking, Mandarin or something like that, as much as I possibly could. Because at least, I think that by itself is probably, enough to do. The other thing that I suppose gets a bit awkward is if there's a lot of talking back and forth in that language, you might be okay, do I just say speaking Italian and then have the caption go away and then no captions appear on screen until they stop speaking Italian?
Speaking Italian dismissively, speaking Italian aggressively, or things like that with intent behind how they're talking.
Yeah, that's I think I did a little bit of that back in the day, but we had to keep that to a reasonable minimum too, because of course then you're are you introducing interpretations that weren't intended, blah blah blah. But yeah, so I sort of feel that if it's not intended to be understood by the audience, maybe don't translate it, but just sort of say they're speaking this language or that language. Yeah, that's my take. It's very.
I'll tell you one really frustrating experience I had with subtitles. I was watching the 2018 version of Suspiria on Amazon Prime,
Uh-huh.
And so Amazon Prime, it is the worst streaming service, in my opinion. You would think that Amazon, of all companies, could invest in a functioning platform, but they do not. And Suspiria, which they co-produced, a lot of the dialogue is in German, and we were watching it, and we noticed there were no subtitles that showed up at any point. So we kind of, we just kind of assumed that you weren't supposed to understand what the German was, despite the fact that there was so much of it, and there was a lot of focus on what seemed like was supposed to be dialogue in German, but just went untranslated. And after, I think we were like halfway through the movie, we turned the subtitles on, and we found that all the German was being translated we turned the closed captioning on.
Yeah.
And we found that all the German was being translated in the closed captioning. So you had to have the full closed captions on with with sound descriptions and everything, just to understand that dialogue. And there was no option just for German subtitles when listening to the English language. And I thought that was lazy and infuriating, especially for a film that this company co-produced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that is, so I mean, interestingly enough, that was actually like one of the things we always had to do when we were closed captioning was the minute like text appeared at the bottom of the screen, like subtitles, you bounced that caption up to the top and get it out of the way so that people can read the bottom. You'd have to put the captions up top because you need, and that included for subtitles. Like if something had subtitles, which and I did a lot of stuff that had subtitles because, there were, there was sort of mixed language movies. There were a lot of documentaries that had obviously like interviews with people in languages other than English. And yeah, you got the closed captions out of the way. And frankly, if it was like in this sort of case where it's like they're speaking they're speaking a language other than English, and it's usually that would be subtitled, and you just turn the captions off at that point. You might have one caption that says speaking German, and then you turn it off and let the subtitles do the work for you. So the fact that they didn't even have subtitles and they had it only on the closed caption, yeah, that's not good. That's not good.
Unacceptable, in my opinion.
I have thoughts. They're not good.
To close off, let's just step back to what I think you did kind of between the timing. With the timing, I think you kind of did it between your work at Ocean and your work closed captioning, working on Tokusatsu Spider-Man. You did the subtitles for that stream, which was around like 2009-ish, I think.
Yeah, that was actually still with Ocean, actually.
Okay.
Or it was either with Ocean or like they had one of those like sort of sub companies under them. But it was still with Ocean. I did that work. That one was an interesting shift because like up to that point, of course, I had been very focused on, in the dub scripts, it was very much kind of, I have to, again, do the translation, figure things out, make sure that things are, lip movements are fine, that this is fine. I've got to do a lot of rewriting of the entire sentence to make it, sound more natural. And whereas subtitle was pretty much immediately kind of like, nope, you keep the text almost the way it is. You maybe make a change if something like sounds really awkward or if it's going too long. And then the focus was very much more on the timing, like basically going through the episode and being like, okay, at this point, this text needs to be on screen. At this point, this text needs to be on screen, and dividing it up in a way so that like, one of the things that always drives me nuts for a lot of like captioning and subtitling is when like sentences will just kind of like drift, like it'll be something like, you fool, you've activated my, and then you have to wait for the next caption to be like trap card. And so that was something that like we actively tried to avoid, that like every subtitle should kind of, obviously it might not be the whole sentence, but it should feel sort of somewhat like, this is ending at a decent place for this sentence to end, like on a comma or on a period or, whatever. So I was doing a lot of that. God, that show was bonkers. It's just sorry, I'm just suddenly remembering just like that show the Tokusatsu Spider-Man was just such a departure from every other Spider-Man franchise I've ever been exposed to. And I'm not even that much of a Spider-Man fan. I was just like, so wait, it's Spider-Man, but there's a mech in it, and like, called Leopardon? What does a leopard have to do with Spider-Man? There's like a bunch of Rita Repulsa rejects upstairs, Have you watched it?
Oh, yeah, I've seen some of it, and I think the best thing is that everyone always assumes that they gave Spider-Man a giant robot to make him, like, fit in with trends in Japan, but that was actually the first Tokusatsu series that had a giant robot. It started that trend. They thought Spider-Man, to make Spider-Man work in live action, let's give him a giant robot. This thing you see in anime. Obviously, that's the missing element here that will make this show work, and they were right. It's unfortunate. Apparently the mech was destroyed after just a few episodes of the production. They had to keep reusing footage of it though, which is led to it being even more bonkers.
Well, and it was just like, it was one of those interesting things where like it took, because of course the character of Spider, it's not Peter Parker, it's a Japanese motorcyclist, I think. Yeah. I've forgotten his name. And of course it was definitely one of those things where like, oh, and then he's got like, a sister and a girlfriend and all of these people that, don't know of his secret identity, and so, they're constantly thinking he's a layabout, and I'm like, but I can't describe it. It played in a very different way than a lot of like secret identity drama does in Spider-Man, in Western Spider-Man. I think, to be fair, because most of the time when I've dealt with Spider-Man in the past, it hasn't really been a Monster of the Week format. This was very much a Monster of the Week format where it's like, and today we're going off to, the pool, and then there's a monster at the pool, and the guy has to sneak away from his girlfriend and sister at the pool while they're like, what's with that guy? He's totally undependable. And so there was very much sort of like a formula that was, lend itself to that, just sort of constantly like, and this week we're going to be here, but then there was like giant mechs. And
did you coin the phrase "emissary from hell" for Spider-Man describing himself, or did that just kind of come?
I think that was part of the original script. I don't think I can claim that. I will say actually, like, I do want to take a step back and say, like, we're sort of saying, like, oh my god, this is bonkers, this is stupid. It's like, I feel, vaguely uncomfortable saying that because, like, of course, it was for a Japanese audience. It's like there are cultural differences here, and probably it was not as quote unquote bonkers or weird to that audience, and I'm really glad that they got enjoyment and that it did as well as it did. It's just that from a perspective of knowing other Spider-Man franchise and seeing this interpretation of it, it's just so different that, it kind of
honestly, I think it's perfectly reasonable in a broader sense of things to say that it's bonkers, because it was weird and revolutionary weird in Japan, and it just gets, the further back you step, the weirder it is as like a cultural artifact.
I'd love to know what some of like the reactions to it at the time were. Like, was this like everybody was like, this is the best thing ever, or were they like, this is really weird, what the hell? I'd love to know what the reactions were.
But hey, on that note, that also reminds me, you worked with the Emissaries of Light, Cure White and Cure Black, and the Emissary from Hell, Spider-Man. So that really rounds out your career in translation or script adaptation and subtitling in an interesting way.
Yeah, now all I need to do is somehow get connected to, like, I don't know, a reboot of Deep Space Nine, and then I can be, the actual emissary, and then my geek career will be complete. It's good. Yeah.
So Michelle, can you talk a little about what you do now with game, like with your current career with game writing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as I said, I'm working as a in this outsourcing studio, Tailspinners, and it's kind of it's a lot of sort of freelance work. So we've been it's less it's not like I am working at, say, Blizzard or BioWare. Oh, I'd love to work at BioWare. But it's more, they'll call us in for a particular project where they might need something like, we've already got a script, but it's not very good. We need someone to help us, and we'll, go in and help them and try and fix it. There's other times when it will be like, no, we need we're just starting the game from scratch. We need someone to help us workshop this and like help us come up with a story. Sometimes it's just like, yeah, we've got a general story. We just need somebody to write the script. So every project is a little bit different. In terms of what I've been doing lately that I'm allowed to talk about, I worked on, there is a game coming out for the PlayStation 5 called Destruction All-Stars. Which is sort of I can't talk too much about it, but if you want to see it, it's in the PlayStation 5 reveal trailer they did a couple months back. I worked on that, had a lot of fun. I recently did editing and rewriting for a game called a 2D platformer called Ageless. I've done quite a lot of sort of mobile visual novels, kind of like I haven't worked for episodes, but like that type of thing, so very like choice-based visual novel, romance kind of stuff, as well as
quite a burgeoning market for that over the last few years, to say the least. For sure. Well, partly because people have realized, like, wait a minute, like, wait, you say that, women like romance, the devil, you say. Maybe we should get in on that, just a little bit. Which has been great to see, although it's been interesting, like, obviously it's a bit of a Wild West, at the moment. So I've been doing some work on that. I've released actually a couple, interactive fiction on, this, platform called Sana, which you can check out, Bonds of the Ninja and The Tower of Shalott. I edited, if you can believe, a cat dating sim, which is not that kind of cat dating sim. It was called Perfect Date, where basically you go on an island and there's a bunch of cats there and you befriend them, and they needed an editor for that. I've worked on a bunch of games that we're just not allowed to talk about and will never get released, which is always frustrating. Yeah, and then, and of course I worked on a game called, Everreach Project Eden, which is, a 3D, third person, shooter, sci-fi shooter. It's basically what happens if you try to make Mass Effect on a budget, which it's not quite as good as like old school Mass Effect, but it was a budget and it was a really fun, project to work on. So, I'm sure there's other credits to my name that I'm forgetting. Oh yeah, the other thing I do is I do a lot of lecturing and sessions at various game industry conferences about sex in games and basically making it more sexy for a more diverse audience, because one of my frustrations with video games, video discussions about sexualization in video games was that it was very much kind of focused on a very specific type of character, the type of character that has boobs and butt and is not wearing a lot, and so much of the debate seemed to be like either no, you shouldn't have them, or yes, you should have them, or and I was like, okay, that's all well and good. It's a discussion worth having, but the discussion I'm interested in is like, why are we not talking about what other people would find attractive? Like for me, I have opinions about sort of over-sexualized female characters, but the reason why I get ticked off is if I start playing a game and all the female characters are sexy, but none of the male characters are. Yeah. And then I'm like, dude, this is more or less my stance on that issue. I think we need balance.
Yeah. I think there is still something to be said for, like, there's a difference between sexualization versus objectification, and there's something to be said for, like, well, historically there's been more sexualization of women, and, like, that's all conversations to have, but really, I'm a simple woman with simple needs. I want hot dudes in my game. And that's one reason I love JRPGs so much, because, like, wow, there's a lot of hot dudes in video games. There's, like, Sephiroth and Vincent and, and Cloud and Barret and all these, like, super hot dudes. And they're just kind of there, and so I actually really, when my career was just starting out, I was, I kind of was talking to my mentor at the time about this and saying, man, I really wish someone would talk about this, the importance of making, like, attractive male characters as well. And he's like, you should pitch a talk on it. Oh, no, I haven't, I'm nobody. Oh, do it anyway. He was on the board, so he, was saying, like, oh, look, I'll at least take a look at it. And, they accepted the talk, and I did it, and it apparently was, like, one of the highest rated, talks at the narrative summit at the Game Developers Conference ever had. So I'm like, okay, apparently now my thing is talking about equal opportunity sex appeal. So I've ended up talking about, like, how to write sex scenes, and going into the real nitty gritty, like, let's talk about environment design. Because of course so much of game writing is not just writing the dialogue, it's things like, well, how does the gameplay tell the story? How does the environment tell the story? How does the level tell the story? And so, trying to, like, get people to think of it in those terms, because, man, there are a lot of people that are really squirrely about talking about sex.
Yeah, and I mean, that kind of creates the problem with the way the discourse is being set on that. And I think it's good to try and find ways to reframe these arguments about sexuality, because, as I'm sure you've noticed, the chuds, as we call them, are really positioning this idea that sexuality is being censored out of video games, or the sexuality that they like is being censored out of video games, because, well, I mean, there's the whole thing with Sony shifting their kind of headquarters for gaming from Japan to the US, which has resulted in some changes and some actual censorship, which, there's definitely some issues there, but those guys are, the alt-right crowd is really trying to seize on that and make this argument that they're being persecuted and that games are being scrubbed from, or sexuality is being scrubbed from games. And I think trying to change the focus and change the framing of the discussion amidst all that is really important.
Exactly, because, like, one of the reasons I started talking about this, and I want to stress, I am not the only person talking about this. There are so many women and particularly queer critics and queer game devs that have been basically yelling about this for ages. I just got lucky enough to get given, like, a platform to talk about it. But the thing that always frustrates me is, like, this whole idea of, like, if you're a social justice warrior, then clearly you hate sex.
Yeah.
And I'm like, as someone who is, I classify myself more as a social justice cleric, but, like, it could AoE heals for life. But, I'm just like, what on earth are you talking about? I'm the thirstiest person you will ever fucking meet. It's just that I'm thirsty for other things, dude. So, this idea that, and to be fair, I sometimes get this the other way going too. Like, I will see, like, I sometimes feel that there's this feeling of, okay, we need to be respectful, and therefore we need to make sure that there isn't any sex in this game. And I'm like, that's not the takeaway. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm absolutely fine in saying that, like, yeah, there are probably sometimes that you might want to look at the way you're doing sex and be like, yeah, this is kind of hinky. Maybe we should not do that. But it's more a case of, like, okay, who are you making the sex scene for, and are there ways to actually broaden it so that it appeals to more people? Like, my go-to is always the difference between Witcher 2 and Witcher 3. There's a great sex scene in Witcher 2 where, like, and I mean, I like it, but it's so emblematic of the problem in that, like, Triss gets naked and the camera starts panning up and down her body, and it's all like, look at this sexy naked woman with her sexiness. And then it sort of cuts back to Geralt while he's getting undressed, and, like, the camera's like the other side of the room. He's, like, dancing around trying to take his pants off, but he never actually takes his pants off. There isn't this same sort of, like, drooling adoration of his body that was for Triss. If you then go into, like, Witcher 3, it still has a little bit more of the, wow, there's a lot of naked women in this, but there seems to be much more an awareness of, oh, oh, Geralt is hot. Oh, right, Geralt is hot. We should really, like, actually pay attention to that. That, like, the camera will actually, like, linger on the fact that he's, like, shirtless in bed for a while, and, like, he'll kind of be vaguely glistening, and they get him in the tub, and it's like, yeah, no, this is way more what I'm looking for. So yeah, I feel, it's not that, like, everything is good, like, it doesn't matter, we shouldn't worry about sexualization at all, because, like, there are historical issues in question, but we also don't want to be like, well, sex is bad, just cut off the sex entirely. It's like, no. Again, we're here, we're horny as hell, we are totally thirsty, we are ready for sex, we're ready for hot characters. You're just not, like, just not that specific type. You need to diversify out a bit. And again, like, one of the easiest ways to do it is like, okay, if you want to have a heterosexual sex scene, cool, make the dude hot too. I would like to see more games where I can see that process making happening, because I see it for so many female characters, like, like Aphrodite. It's like, oh yeah, no, like, somebody at this point said, I want to make her hot. Even if it's not a committee, somebody was just like, yeah, I'm gonna make her so sexy. And I want to get that same kind of energy for more male characters, which is why I love Final Fantasy VII, because the remake, because I started playing that, and I got through, like, mild spoiler for chapter 2, I'm going along, and then suddenly Sephiroth shows up, and what is the first thing the camera does? Looks straight at his bare chest and then pans up to his lips. And I'm like, yes, this is the hot man energy I am here for. And I will say, like, actually, bringing it back to anime, like, that was why I think that was a big part of why I did like anime so much, that, like, yes, like, okay, admittedly, when I was into anime, you didn't quite have as much of the lolly, kind of harem stuff that is very popular now. But there was always that feeling like, even when I was watching something that was probably, like, shonen intended for boys, there were characters in there that I was just like, damn, somebody had a lot of fun, like, designing that male character. Hats off. Like Gundam Wing, like, I was never like super into Gundam Wing, but, like, I look at it and I'm like, no, this feels like the sort of thing where somebody was like, yes, absolutely, women might be watching our, like, or straight women might be watching our, like, big mechs in space anime. Let's make some characters that actually appeal to them. And I find that energy, like, pops up quite a lot in anime, as opposed to a lot of Western stuff. Maybe it's not anymore, because, as I said, there's, like, there are some anime nowadays that I look at and I'm like, okay, this is fine. I am clearly not the target audience. But I feel like the idea, like, the anime I used to love did a really good job of blurring the lines of target audiences and being like, yeah, no, everybody's going to be watching this. Let's have hot people that everybody will find hot. And let's have storylines that everybody will enjoy. And I liked it. Yeah. So
I know you mentioned you kind of fell out of anime more in the, like, late 2000s, early 2010s era. I will say that was when as you mentioned, like, the harem shows were kind of at their peak because of the financial crisis, and they were really going for, that audience at that time, because it was the most reliable. It's diversified a lot since then.
Yeah.
And there's,
Free was awesome. Like, I loved Free. Like, I want to stress, this is not me coming for your, for the harem anime. I'm just like, yeah, no, that's fine, whatever you like. But like, when, like, it turned around and been like, oh, and now here's a reverse harem anime. Like, I love reverse harem animes. Like, I mean, I grew, like, oh god, the amount of love I had for Fushigi Yugi was somewhat disturbing.
I know you mentioned you're intimidated by the mountain of backlog of anime that you potentially have to get into, but when you start to look through things, you can find what you want pretty easily every season. Recommendation for you right now: check out My Next Life as a Villainess.
Yes, I want to try that out.
It's the bisexual harem anime. I think that is one that might be my strongest recommendation for you right now.
Yeah.
I can probably think of a few more after, and we can talk about that later. But we got to wrap up. Michelle, where can people find you online or on social media?
So I have a admittedly extremely inactive Twitter account, like at Michelle_Clough. So you can certainly follow me there. At some point in my life, I might even start tweeting, regularly again. Who knows? You can also find me like sort of professionally at I've got a website, www.michelle-clough.com. And there's also Tailspinner's website is tailspinners.co.uk, I think. I do have a Facebook, but I barely ever use it, and I probably would only, to be honest, friend people that I know. But yeah, if you want to reach out to me on one of those platforms, you'd be very welcome. Also, my email is michelle.clough@gmail.com. So I'm terrible at replying to emails, so if you email me and I don't reply, please don't think I'm being bitchy. It's just me being remember the disorganization thing? Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for tuning in to Zonin Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge or email zonincanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultraclystron, and you can find that on his album Packet Flood, which you can find at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcast app of choice is. I also have a Coffee account at ko-fi.com/zonincanada. It does cost money to run the show, and if you appreciate what I do, you can always leave me a tip on that site. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for tuning in, and see you again.